In your quest for spiritual growth, are you deceiving yourself? And how would you know it? Self-deception is often unconscious. It's a subtle yet powerful force that impacts our daily lives. In fact, research shows we engage in self-deception every day. We often fool ourselves by manipulating our beliefs, thoughts, and perceptions to align with our desires and to safeguard our ego's self-image. Self-deception is a clever trick we often play on ourselves without even realizing it, and it blinds us to reality, distorting our perceptions and leading us astray. Self-deception has its roots in the ego's desire for comfort and self-preservation. It often involves downplaying uncomfortable truths about ourselves, such as our flaws, mistakes, or negative emotions. It's a shield we unknowingly use to protect our self-esteem, evade responsibility, avoid uncomfortable emotions, or to shore up self-serving beliefs. Yet this shield also creates blind spots that hinder personal growth and emotional healing, convincing us of an inaccurate reality. So here's the twist. The very force that tries to protect us can also imprison us. While we all engage in self-deception from time to time, the key is to recognize it and challenge it when necessary. It's in recognizing, addressing, and confronting self-deception with honest awareness and humility that we can break free from this self-imposed cage. Indeed, this is vital for personal and spiritual growth. Imagine using spirituality for ego-gratifying purposes. It's known as spiritual materialism, a term coined by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. Spiritual materialism is when we misuse spirituality for self-serving ends, often unconsciously. It can be as subtle as using spiritual practices to make oneself feel superior or special. Imagine someone meditating or doing yoga, not for inner peace or alignment, but to boast about their discipline and dedication. Instead of a means for self-discovery, spirituality can be used to inflate the ego or to boost spiritual pride. People can also chase spiritual experiences for the sake of pleasure, bliss, or excitement, which is another form of spiritual materialism. For instance, some may seek spiritual retreats or engage in practices purely for the calming, pleasurable experiences they bring, turning spirituality into a form of escapism. Such pursuits do not lead to genuine spiritual growth because they're driven by egoic desires for sensory gratification rather than a quest for truth and understanding. Then there are those who use spirituality to avoid facing difficult emotions, challenges, or their shadow side, which is the unconscious part of our personality containing repressed memories and negative qualities. True spiritual growth demands a deep understanding of oneself. However, instead of using their practices as a means to confront and resolve inner conflicts, some use it as a shield to hide from them. They may chant, meditate, or perform rituals, not to attain inner peace, but to escape or avoid the discomfort of facing their emotional realities. To make progress on a spiritual journey, we must be willing to confront self-deception while letting go of egoic attachments with compassion and acceptance. Lastly, spiritual materialism can involve using spirituality to create a positive self-image. This is when we use spirituality to paint a picture of ourselves as enlightened or compassionate or wise, rather than embracing our authentic selves. In all these instances, spirituality is not a path to self-discovery and growth, but a tool for preserving and inflating the ego with self-deception. When we use spirituality to bolster our ego or avoid uncomfortable truths, we're using it to maintain an egoic sense of a separate self that's based on illusion. We would be wise to remember that the ego can hide even in the folds of a monk's robes. The antidote to all of these pitfalls is genuine spiritual practice to overcome the ego and see things as they truly are. Overcoming self-deception is not necessarily easy. It requires courage, humility, and a deep commitment to personal growth. The path to true spiritual growth begins with the willingness to identify and acknowledge our own self-deception. This means looking at ourselves in the mirror of truth and seeing ourselves as we really are, without a false face. It means recognizing our flaws, our weaknesses, and our mistakes, but recognition is just the first step. After acknowledging our self-deception, we have to actively challenge it. This could mean questioning our beliefs, our thoughts, and our perceptions. It could mean confronting those parts of ourselves that we would rather keep hidden. It could mean stepping out of our comfort zone and facing the discomfort of cognitive dissonance. This process of challenging self-deception also requires humility. We must be willing to admit that we don't have all the answers and that we're not always right and that we sometimes deceive ourselves. Humility allows us to open our minds, to consider different perspectives, and to learn from our mistakes. Facing our flaws and shortcomings with total honesty is another crucial aspect of overcoming self-deception. It's easy to gloss over our faults or to justify our mistakes, but this kind of self-deception only hinders our spiritual growth. By confronting our flaws and shortcomings, we can bring them onto the path, learn from them, and use them as stepping stones toward greater self-understanding and spiritual progress. Overcoming self-deception is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. It requires constant vigilance and a firm commitment to truth and integrity. It requires the courage to face ourselves honestly, the humility to admit when we're wrong, and the determination to keep striving for greater self-awareness and spiritual growth. By making a firm commitment to challenge self-deception, we can begin to live more conscious, authentic, and fulfilling lives. We can break free from the chains of self-deception and step into a more authentic, enlightened existence. We can become the best versions of ourselves, grounded in truth and guided by wisdom, and ultimately we can find the peace, joy, and fulfillment that comes from genuine spiritual growth. Well, that's all for today. Please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on our next video in this series, which is all about the ego's role in unconscious self-deception.